Thank you so much for tuning into my show. William Wallace for America with me today as campaign season goes into really high gear from the spring to the fall this year is a candidate who's running for governor in Michigan. And I really think that this guy's going to have some good information that you're going to be very interested in listening to, and someone that you can be passionate about in trying to fix things in Michigan. With me to this episode, brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Remember, go to patriotmobile.com, use that promo code WWFA. Up now is Ralph Rebandt, who's running for governor in Michigan. Ralph, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
William, it's my pleasure. And just so your audience knows, I do have Patriot Mobile service on my phone. I'm using it right now, and it's an amazing company to know that as I give my money every month, that it's going to help support good causes. So I'm just excited to be a part of it. I didn't know they were supporting you, but that's a good tag team effort here.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, they not only support America First agendas, they support veterans and patriots and Christian values, which from what I understand, you're outdoors right now at a church event. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, meeting with a group of pastors from southeastern Michigan, downriver area. It's the area I grew up in. A lot of these guys know me, and they're just they're a blessing to be around.
Well, Ralph, let's get right into it. I got a tough question for you right up front. Probably the toughest one I'm going to have, though. Michigan. I know. Because I don't get very ideological on my podcast and my interviews, and a lot of people go, "Well, you're that. You sound so right wing. You got red, white, and blue everywhere. You must be right wing. You support the Second Amendment." And I say, well, the best way I believe, to inform people and get them motivated is to stop beating everybody up with politics and ideologies and really find where we can come together on solutions. What are the problems? What are the solutions? Things that we can agree on, because let's face it, our country is becoming very diverse, very different. There's a lot of immigration in the last, 10, 15 years, and we got to find ways to bring people together. And speaking of which, Michigan is really changing, I guess, its demographics. It's been going Democrat for quite some time. You're a Republican. I'd like to ask you, how are you going to bring people together to vote for a Republican? What are those issues?
So, William, that's a great question. What brings people together? And my answer is one word: it's truth. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, black or white, or even international folks coming here. People want to know what the truth is. And as a candidate for governor here in Michigan, career politicians, those who have been in legislature for 14 years, those who have been in DC, oftentimes they'll stretch the truth, they'll lie, they'll say things that they know the public wants to hear. And then once they get in, they don't do what they say they're going to do. And that's pretty much the history and the record of everyone that's running right now. But that's what I'm running on. I'm running on a platform of truth. And so when I make a promise as a governor candidate, I'm telling people things that I will actually die for. I don't know how else to word it. I mean, the things that the Bible says, blessed is he who swears to his own hurt. And when I look at our Lord Jesus Christ, he said things that were true, and he ended up dying for them. And I'm more than happy to follow that example and to just let people know that if they put me in as their governor, we're going to have truth resonating in every department in Michigan.
I love hearing the answer on truth, because I think truth is something that politics has lost. And I think people are getting tired of politics, and they're uniting more around real people that, are just running on truth instead of, hey, we're going to do this for you, do that for you. And like you said, they get in office and they don't do anything for you. Have you held office before? I mean, maybe it's a naive question because, I don't know your history, and neither does my audience. So I'm going to give you that opportunity to talk about that for a second, your history.
I've not held political office, but I've been involved in public life for over 35 years. I'm the chaplain for the Michigan Chiefs of Police, several organizations in southeastern Michigan. The largest endorsing agency in Michigan from the Chiefs Department has unanimously endorsed me to run for governor. As I said, I've been involved in everything in public life, from the year 2000 committee in Farmington Hills to coaching baseball, planning things, not planning commission, but on all kinds of things that were forward looking. And yeah. So what I tell people is the fact that I haven't held public office is really to my favor. If you look at how people get bought off, or they, their arms twisted behind their back because they've done something, they've said something, they bought into something. I don't have any of that baggage, and that message is really resonating with people because they know that, as I tell people, I've already been bought once. And I don't mean to keep bringing this back to a religious perspective, but I've been bought once by the blood of Jesus Christ. And there's no amount of money that could buy my vote or buy truth or a lie from me. It just won't happen. I've never had that in my life. And I have 35 years of faithful ministry to the Lord. So, yeah, I've not held public office. But, the issue is when it comes to the budget, William, we looked at the budget very carefully, and we are able to take out 11 to 12 billion dollars out of it in the next budget cycle. I have what I call a veto pen, and I've been giving them out at events we go to because I will veto these items that are not only promoting lifestyles and things that aren't right. I mean, transgender stuff, boys and girls bathrooms. I will not only just take that out of the budget, but I'm going to take it out of legislation as well. And I won't sign anything that harms people or their ability to live the American dream here in Michigan.
Well, one of the things that you said just now, I absolutely love, which is you're not a politician that's running. And when I hear your answer, what I hear is you're going to give the budget the eyes of a non-politician. And it's
Right.
politicians who've gotten us into trouble that we're in, not just nationally, but locally. And I think when you are political, you're more geared towards making financial decisions that are based on the ideologies or the narratives that you ran on, instead of being fiscally responsible
Right.
and reflecting that fiscal responsibility on the budget, along with not having our tax dollars pay for things that have nothing to do with government at all. And I like that about you.
Well, I'll give you an example. He's a nice guy. He's running for governor, but he stands up and he says, I'm going to take a blowtorch to the budget. I'm going to take a blowtorch to the bureaucracy. I'm going to take a blowtorch to the monopoly that Consumers Energy and DTE has. And William, the interesting thing is he's voted for every budget. So how can you cut a budget that you voted for, number one,
Right.
that you were in favor of? Number two, when he talks about taking a blowtorch to DTE and Consumers Energy, he's received over $700,000 from them for his reelection campaigns. He's not going to do anything.
Right.
It's just that's a good example of someone telling people what they want to hear and watch them cheer when they don't really know what his history is. So, as a pastor, I've had to tell the truth. So on one debate, I called him out on it, and you could have heard a pin drop. He didn't answer the question. The question was, has anyone received money for their campaigns from DTE and Consumers Energy? I knew that he had, and I knew that another guy had. And so I just leaned over to the microphone and I said, Eric received $700,000 from those two companies, and he would not admit it, but he had to come around and admit it in a sheepish way, which, to me, that's why we are where we are. People
do you
are.
let's talk a little bit about some other problems I think that Michigan has had from my point of view, from what I've heard, down south. And look, Louisiana has had the same issue in the past. Out migration. Is Michigan losing population from people that have been there their whole lives and multi generations? Is there an immigration problem in Michigan? And kind of what I'm getting to is the demographics. Are they going to turn? Do you think they're turning away from a Republican governor next, or are they turning back to a Republican-minded person? Maybe not party, but maybe your ideas and your principles and your beliefs. So can we walk that line of population increase, decrease, versus you being able to get the vote of people that are there with the good ideas and your platform?
Yes. We do have an out-migration issue. Michigan's population has been stagnant and declining. You know, there are kids born every day in Michigan, but we haven't increased our population at all. We've lost people. You know, we hear every day, and I know I've had friends that have moved since 2022. When Whitmer won, they moved out of the state. They moved to Florida. They moved to Tennessee. One of the biggest complaints is that we can't keep our children here. You know, they go off to college and they never come back because Michigan has really squelched the American dream for so many people. And my goal as governor is to do exactly what you said. My goal is to resonate with everybody. In fact, William, I got a quick story if you were interested, but
Absolutely.
we have highways into Detroit. When I talk about highways, I'm not talking about cement. I'm talking about uh, ideological from my campaign. And I'll give you a quick story. I was in Ann Arbor a few weeks ago, and I ran into an African American man at the dry cleaners, and I was going to let him in first because I just, why not? He was walking behind me, and I was just going to be polite. We both walk in, and he says, "You look like an attorney." I said, "Well, I'm not an attorney." And he says, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a pastor running for governor of Michigan." He said, "That's crazy." He said, "I have a ministry that helps young people transition from juvenile detention back into real life." So we talked about it a little bit more, and he had a white suit. And I said, "What are you doing with the white suit?" He said, "Well, I'm getting it cleaned and pressed because we're having a white party." And I said, "What's the white party?" And he says, "Well, all of us black guys are celebrating one of our friends' birthdays. We're all going to dress in white suits. The ladies are wearing white dresses. And, that's what the white party is." I said, "Well," I said, um, as we were talking, I said, would it be out of place for me to ask if I could come to that?" He said, "Oh, no, not at all." I said, "Well, I don't have a white suit. I have a black suit." He said, "That's all right, Ralph." He said, "You can be the white guy in a black suit. We'll be all the black guys in white suits." And we laughed. But they said, "Meet us at this address. We're going out to dinner." Well, as Carol and I were driving, to use the words of the birthday boy, we went into the hood. The address was his house, and then he invited us into his basement. And he then talked for about 10 minutes on why his 25 friends in the room should help me become governor. He said, "I don't care if Ralph has an R behind his name. We know that Mike Dugan hasn't helped us. We know that Mary Sheffield hasn't helped us. The Democrats have disappointed us. They haven't done anything for us, but Ralph's got plans, and they will help us." And I asked him, I said, when he got done, I said, "Do all you in the room want to know my policies?" And he said, "No, I know enough about you right now." He said, "You're a man of courage. I invited you I invited you to an address, which was my house, and you came. You came into my basement." And he said, "It tells me a couple things about you. One is you're a man of courage, and two, you keep your word." And he said, "That's all you need to know." And so then we went to the restaurant to eat, and there were about another 25 guys. And he was encouraging all of them to get behind me to help me win this governor's race and win Wayne County, which would be a first in Michigan history. And I asked him what his story was, and he said, "We all met in prison, but we want to give back to our community and help make them safer." And I was just blown away. And these guys are behind me. But I don't know if you know what's going on in terms of the Secretary of State office. They're trying to take me off the ballot. And we have to know by Friday. That's another story. I'd be happy to share with you what's going on in the
Yes.
corruption in that.
Yes.
But
Please
yeah,
share that story with us, please.
so really quick, you have to turn in 15,000 good signatures to get on the ballot here in Michigan. They don't charge you money. You just have to come up with 15,000 good signatures. We received about 20,000. They were done primarily by volunteers. There were people who helped us in areas that we knew they needed some money, so we did pay them a little bit. But the percentage of people who got our petition signed, I would say it's probably 95% or greater who are just volunteers. And we went through those 20,000. We found about 2,000 that we needed to erase. So there were people who signed in the wrong county. They, instead of putting the date that they signed the petition, they put their birthday. These are things that would typically violate or invalidate their signature. So we went through
Right.
everyone, crossed them out, and we turned in 18,214. That number is 20% over what was required. Unbeknownst to us, the Bureau of Elections has a process called sampling. They take 750 signatures And they look at those signatures and they say, how many of these are good? And then they extrapolate that into the larger number. So what they said out of our 750 signatures is that there were 217 that were not valid. Now, we challenged those last week at the Board of Canvassers, and our attorney searched them all out, and their numbers were way off, and they wouldn't show us why were signatures that were bad, things that they had claimed. And we said, well, give us 2 days, give us Friday and Monday, yesterday, to go to the local clerks and get these signatures verified, because we're convinced those are good. They wouldn't grant that. So our attorney over the weekend was trying to figure out what's our path. We knew we were going to go to the Court of Appeals, but we didn't know what it would look like. Well, on Saturday night, he comes across the fact that the Bureau of Elections started the sampling process in 2023. If you remember 2022, there were 5 governor candidates in Michigan, that Republicans, that were kicked off the ballot for bad signatures. That was a totally different story. They had hired the same company to get them signatures, and the same company couldn't get signatures for that many people in that short of a time. So they were all invalid and fraudulent signatures. That's not my issue. Nobody's saying they're invalid or fraudulent. So basically, the sampling.
Your issue. Pardon me for 1 second. I'm sorry.
No.
Your issue is more of your campaign having hit a landmine that was created by a legislative body that loves creating these little bitty regulations now, or maybe it was the Bureau of Elections that created the regulations. I don't know, but usually it's a legislative body that controls that. But I've witnessed it myself in Louisiana, where they create the now, and of course some people look at it and they say, well, we need those little regulations, we need those stopgaps or safeguards to prevent fraud. But the reality is, some of those things have been put in there by people that have figured out, when they know that when they know it's there, the landmine's there, they can use that landmine when they need to get their opponents or opponents of their friends out. I'll let you continue.
You've outlined that very closely to what happened. So the Bureau of Elections started the sampling process in their policy manual, and then they realized this has no authority unless we get the legislature to approve it. So they call over to the legislature, which is a Democratic House in Michigan at the time and a Democratic Senate. They pass House Bill 5571 through 5576. So everything's going great. They put it on Governor Whitmer, a Democratic governor's desk, and she vetoes it. She said this will never become law. That's her first paragraph. The second paragraph basically said there's a lot of distrust of the election process in Michigan, and only looking at 750 signatures will only create greater distrust. Every signature has to count. That's the democratic process. So she vetoed it. Well, the Bureau of Elections basically said, we don't care if she vetoed it. It's in our policy manual. We're going to keep doing it. So they don't have any statutory or legal authority to just look at 750 signatures. The definition of canvass, we have a state board of canvassers. The definition of canvass means you look at every signature. And so we have filed in the Court of Appeals, not only exposing the fact that the Bureau of Elections has basically denied the governor's veto by continuing this unlawful practice, but the definition itself means that you've looked at you need to look at every signature. And in fact, the director of the Bureau of Elections, Jonathan Brader, in 2022 said, when they were looking at the fraudulent signature, we looked at every signature. Well, why don't they look at every signature this time? Well, I would say option one is they don't want me on the ballot. They're trying to use this ploy to get me off the ballot. Or option two is they don't have enough staff to do it, which in which case you would think you would plan ahead and make sure you have enough staff. Or option three is I don't know. I had it. I just lost my ear, but I was just softball.
That's okay. That's okay. While you're fixing it, I have something to say anyway. So
yeah, I can hear you.
One of the things that I like to point that other things I want to point out is that you talked about the Board of Elections. I think it is has created this law or this regulation, it makes my point that I made in my show before about the bureaucratic state in our country and in our individual states that are, that are subverting our constitutions by creating rules and laws outside of the legislative process. These bureaucratic agencies get all this power. They get a little bit of power to be able to create some statutory things outside of the legislative process, and they ride it. And it was often put there by somebody, so another governor, somebody else in charge, that saw it as a tool that could
Right.
be used for to win an election or to eliminate a candidate later. So, you're
That's
basically having to fight the bureaucratic state right now, and not even the Constitution.
That's exactly right. And that's what the question is. Can four unelected bureaucrats override 18,000 signatures of citizens that have signed my petition to get me on? And my answer is no. That is an abuse of power, and they don't even have the authority to do that. And that's what our attorney has said. In fact, the interesting thing is I got a call from a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, who has Clinton and Obama's phone numbers, and he was meeting with him here in Flint several years ago. I mean, this guy is very, very known in the Democratic Party here in Michigan, and he called me and he said, Ralph, this is not right. I will testify on your behalf if this goes to court, because this is not the democratic process. The voice of the people is being squelched, and I can't let that happen. I may not vote for you, and I probably won't vote for you, but I'll defend your right to be on the ballot, not a 750 signature sampling.
And see, you're making a great point there, Ralph. This is exactly what I talk about on my show a lot, where that we have so many people that we've been controlled by, or narratives or ideologies, to not like each other because of a party, or not like each other because of our personal ideologies. But this is a great example that when you turn to the things that you can agree on, things like truth,
Yep.
integrity, then you find people of different parties and different ideologies coming together. And those individual places that we can come together on can not only solve problems in our country and in our states, but they can bring more people together to preserve freedoms and liberties, truth and justice for everybody as a whole,
Right.
even when we do disagree.
Yes. Yes. I had such a great conversation with this man. He said, it'd be great to do dinner together. He said, I've never met you in person. I've listened to your videos online. And he said, I think I really like you. But, you're right. William, we used to be a culture. When you think back of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, and, these guys would go at each other, and then they would go out for a beer afterwards, and have dinner together. They would talk about their kids' soccer games, or, what their next vacation was. That they got along. Then we went to cancel culture. You disagree with me, you're going to get canceled. We're going to do everything we can to dox you, get your name out there. And now, unfortunately, we're in assassination culture. That's the sad thing about it right now, because people have lost their minds. They've lost their ability to even think clearly. And we've trained a generation of people who don't even know how to think or debate or come to a conclusion. We just give them a megaphone and they stand and scream in the back of your head, which I've had at different events where I've gone into uh, difficult
So
situations.
let's change the topic a little bit, because now I see, not only are you fighting against people who do not believe in truth, your campaign is fighting against not against bringing truth and light to what your campaign is going through. But let's go beyond that. What are the major issues that Michigan is facing? And we don't have to go into lots of detail, but what are those major issues that are really in your crosshairs after you
Yeah.
win this, after you win this appeal?
Yes, yes. Well, there are many. To name a few, one is education. The educational issue is that we are 44th in the nation. That's how far down the list we are. We have plans to totally rebuild the education system here in Michigan. Part of the problem is that the Michigan Education Association and the teachers unions, not the teachers, but the union leadership, as you know, most of the time those are corrupt. They want, it's all about indoctrination. It's not about education, it's about indoctrination. And so that's a huge issue we're fighting. Another one is transparency across the board. Every government agency has people who sign non-disclosure agreements. Citizens need to know where their money's going and why are they signing these non-disclosure agreements on data centers, on solar fields, on, Whitmer's signed a non-disclosure agreement to get rid of a guy named Robert Gordon. Benson did the same thing, gave somebody $700,000 to just walk away. This doesn't make sense. And so that's huge. People are not trusting the government here in Michigan, and I think that's why my message has been resonating all over Michigan. In the last 3 speeches I've given, William, and I'm not crediting myself with it, but I've had 2 standing ovations in the last 3 speeches that I've given because people realize what I'm saying is true, that Lansing has totally ignored the citizens, that the representatives that they send to Lansing aren't representing them, and I've got ways to fix that. So, we could talk about transparency, whether it's in, the Michigan Department of Education, whether it's in the Michigan Economic Development Corporation or the Health and Human Services. These are areas that really, really need to be cleaned up, some of them torn down and rebuilt. And we do have a plan, and that's where if people were to go to rebandt4governor.com, we have a blueprint. We don't have talking points like most politicians. Oh, we're pro-life and we're First Amendment and we're, Second Amendment. We are all of that, but we have the how we're going to clean up Michigan and how we're going to change this so that it's not just a situation where, okay, Ralph gets elected as a Republican. He's got 4 years to try to straighten this out. He does it by executive orders or administrative directives. No, we're going to change through the legislature the way things are fundamentally run in Michigan so that it protects the next generation and the generations to come.
I like what you said about, how your campaign is all about First Amendment, Second Amendment, pro-life, issues like that. But what I like where you went with that even more is that you said, but we are working on these things. Like a lot of people have heard the rhetoric over and over again. They hear the Republican candidates say, we're pro-life, we're pro-First Amendment, Second Amendment. And of course, they get in office and they don't protect all those things as they said as people believe they would, and they rest their hat on that. They hang their hat on that. Just like on the left, ideologically, Democrats will run on, transgender issues or whatever the case may be, or, pro-choice. People, I believe, have been beaten over the head with politics, narratives, and ideologies so much they're almost numb to people, to candidates who run on that. And that's what I find enlightening about your campaign is that you're saying, let's just go in there and fix things. Let's just go in there, find what's wrong, and fix it the right way for everybody. Can you give any other examples on what you plan on doing?
Sure. Let me give you the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, $1.2 billion in our budget. The Mackinac Center here in Michigan has examined all of their corporate giveaways, and they are less than 10% effective. Any business can't keep running on less than 10% effectiveness. And that department is just as corrupt as they come. What happens, that's a 3-member board appointed by the governor, and they're all green energy people. One of them has a company that's all green energy. So they are moving the whole state toward solar, wind. By 2040. They want Michigan to be totally green in terms of energy, which doesn't work in a state that only has maybe 180 or 200 days of sunlight. It's just not going to happen. It's lunacy, but it's a way that they can get a lot of money really fast over the next 10 years as they invest in it. So what would Ralph do differently? I would take that board from a 3-member appointed by the governor panel. And typically, let me back up once. Typically, what the next governor would do is, okay, well, we'll get rid of these 3 people that are all green and we'll get some people with common sense in there. Well, that doesn't protect the next generation from the next governor could be Democrat from putting three green people back in and running the same program. So what my example of fixing that is we're going to move it from a 3-member panel to a 5-member panel. Those people are not simply appointed by the governor, but they have to be approved by the Michigan Senate. So you have check and balance. And not only are these 5 people there, but there's going to be terms of service. So the people that are on there would have maybe one more term to serve, one more year on their term. The new people that I would appoint would have 2 years. And so it would be staggered so that if a governor comes in, he can't just immediately dump 3, bring 3 on, which it helps if you're Republican or Democrat.
Right.
We want to protect the citizens of Michigan from that kind of radical change in a radical different administration. And so even though I could and I would immediately get rid of the 3 that are in there. I would set it up so that the generations to come would have a better chance at what's going
More
on.
balanced approach. It sounds like
exactly. Yeah.
It sounds like you're always you're being fair to say there's always going to be a couple of people that over time could reflect the population of Michigan more, right, instead of just an ideological party approach to whoever's in office. And just to bounce on something real quick, I said I've reflect on something you said. Green energy. I have zero problem with green energy. I think that it's something that we can certainly add. Everybody fights against. We have one side fighting against solar panels and the AI data centers, and I say, what? Instead of allowing them to sneak in and grab the government money that has been set up in an ideological way, using the narratives and basically pretty much money laundering scheme, techniques, right, to get green energy in, which is what's been happened in our country. I mean, look what happened during the Obama years with the solar panel company crash. But if we did it in a way where we made these companies actually be partners in our community, good stewards of the earth, and do it in a way where it makes sense and it's sensible, using whether it's taxpayer money or public money, instead of just this way that was shoved down our throats. And here's where we are. Now we got to pick up the pieces. Did I say that right? Too long? What's your thought on that?
No, you're absolutely right. And, part of the problem is with the MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, my goal is to just eliminate that whole group. The local chambers of commerce can do exactly what they're doing without giving away $1.2 billion. It's just staggering. It's just staggering.
But where I am in Louisiana, we have the same kind of slush fund on a statewide level. I get it.
I know, and that's how people become millionaires after they're in office for a couple of years. You just start voting for these crazy bills that hurt the taxpayer, and then they actually put so much money in the pocket of the politicians that they're not willing to listen to their constituents anymore. They're getting their marching orders from the special interest groups, and that's why. I'm resonating in Michigan everywhere I go because I'm not tied to that. I don't have a history of that. I've not voted for that. I'm just going in with saying, let's do common sense principles. I don't know, William, if you've seen the movie Dave. Have you seen that with Kevin Kline?
I have. That's been a while, yeah.
It has been a while, but man, if your listeners want some pretty funny entertainment, Dave is just hilarious. And there's a scene where he is in the boardroom and they're discussing the budget. And I just say that would be me. That would be me in that boardroom, asking some very common sense questions and cutting the budget and putting money where it's most needed. And that's the point. We don't want all this waste, fraud, and abuse going to people like Faye Bodine, who was a big supporter of Gretchen Whitmer. She got $20 million given to her to start for a company called Global Link. That money was approved, William, get this, it was approved to give to her before she even started the business. She starts the business, and what flags it is she buys a $10,000 coffee maker. That flagged the citizens and the news here in Michigan. And then it worked its way back to say she was given $20 million of our tax money. Well, now Faye Bodine, is being examined and investigated for fraud. Well, my question is not just her, but who on the MEDC voted for her $20 million giveaway before the business was ever in existence. Those are
I
the
wonder if
people we should be going after.
I wonder if there's I wonder if somebody on the board has a coffee machine business.
Ah, boy, you're
You know,
right. And
well,
you know, it actually,
what other issues are on your plate? What are the issues are on your radar that's happening?
well, obviously, the illegal immigration is affecting Michigan as well. Michigan is a border state, and we are getting people in from Wisconsin. We're getting people in from Canada. And then, of course, just coming across the border from Ohio and Indiana up into Michigan. It's a big issue. We've had people that have illegal immigrants that have killed people, whether they're driving a car. We all heard about the truck driver down in Florida from California who killed people. Um, we have the same problem here in Michigan. I have a pastor friend whose daughter was hit head on by an illegal driving a car, didn't know what double yellow lines meant, crossed over the double yellow line, hits her. She dies, not him. She dies. And, you know, we could talk about the violence in Grand Rapids, the violence in Detroit, illegal immigrants. It's a problem. So we have a lot we have to fix. I mentioned education. I mentioned truth. I mentioned the budget. We're not waiting for day one to start doing things. We've assembled, as I said, a team that has already combed through the budget. We're promoting our budget audit already. My last name is Rebandt. So we're calling it the Ralph's Emergency Budget Audit, REBA.
I love
So
it.
we're
Here's
doing.
a funny tidbit for you. I have a buddy of mine. I saw him last night. He's an elected official here in my area. I said, and his name is Ralph Brandt. So I said,
Wow.
I, I said, Ralph, I'm interviewing a distant cousin. I mean, I know you're not, but so, but either way, go.
Yeah.
I'll let you continue. Interrupt you with a bad joke.
Yeah, so immigration's a problem here in Michigan. Oh, gee, what else? We've got so many things. I'm sorry, I'm just drawing a blank at the moment.
Are we real? I mean, again, I'm in Louisiana. You hear things in the news. Are there really areas that are becoming no-go zones, or where the immigrants have created their own little cities within a city? Is that truthful? Is that really happening in Michigan, like Dearborn, Michigan, things like that?
Yeah, in Dearborn, there was a dispute. A pastor in Dearborn shows up and he's objecting to, I don't know if it was the street names being changed to reflect people who were terrorists. I think that's what the issue was. But the mayor of Dearborn said, well, when you leave our city, you're not welcome here. When you leave our city, we're going to have a celebration. I mean, there's stuff like that going on. I don't know of any no-go zones. You know, I'm the chaplain for the chiefs of police in southeastern Michigan. That has not come up yet. I think if it did, it would be a big issue. You know, you probably heard that in Dearborn Heights, they were trying to put their names in Arabic, you know, and stuff like that on their uniforms. That didn't fly. It somehow got leaked out, which was good because, you know, we live in America. People
Right.
need to learn English. But, you know, the things that, William, I'll just tell you, the things that disgust me are things that really hurt women. You know, they have this female genital mutilation, FGM, that on little girls, that I don't care if it's religious or not, that's an abuse for those little girls. You know, if a woman gets divorced in the Muslim community, my understanding is the husband gets the kids. That's an abuse of women. And those are the things that I would be fighting against and fighting for women in those situations, because we've come too far in America to let that kind of thing happen. It's not constitutional. I've told people that America was found on biblical principles, not on the Quran. It wasn't found on the sayings of Confucius. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence are all based on biblical truth. And I've been sharing that for the last 4 years since the last election, that God, the Word of God, the Scriptures are what our founders used to frame our Constitution and everything else. And that's what's made America great, you know. And I'll tell you, the stark reality is, if I was to go to a Muslim country I would not have the freedoms and rights that I do here in America. But we let them into our country and we give them every freedom and right that we have constitutionally. And so, the contrast couldn't be stronger. And that's why if I become governor of Michigan, I'm going to make sure that people understand whether they're, coming from Germany or coming from Saudi Arabia, that we are Americans, we have a constitution, and I will uphold that.
And you want to bring Michigan people together to be able to make Michigan a stronger state.
That is exactly right. And what's interesting about the Muslims, we have some things that are in common. You talked about the commonality. They all want to raise their children. They don't want this indoctrination of their kids. They don't want their kids to hear this transgender nonsense. They don't want that. And they showed up at a school board meeting in Dearborn in mass about 2 years ago. I mean, it was huge. And I asked myself, where the Americans showing up? Why aren't we fighting against it to the same degree? Well, we agree on those things, and I'm convinced that these folks will vote for me because I'm fighting for their kids. I'm fighting for their religious freedoms, even though it's not what I agree with, even though it's not what our country was founded on. You can come to America and you can worship a tree if you want. I'm not here to tell people what they're going to worship or who they're going to worship, or if they don't want to worship at all. But I will tell them that there is such a thing as truth, and I will defend biblical truth on every angle.
Well, two more quick questions as we walk out, and I'll let you answer them in the order that you want. First, I'm going to give you the opportunity to, if there's any other thing you're running on that you wanted to kind of highlight real quick before we wrap up. But I do ask everybody on my show one final question: where do you think that we are losing freedom the fastest in America? Where do you think we're losing freedom in America? So you can wrap up on the final with that answer, or with the one that kind of gives you more of a blanket statement if there's anything that we forgot to talk about with your candidacy.
Yeah, my candidacy, and I was thinking about this just before I answered your previous question. In terms of our platform, we are doing our best to make Michigan affordable for the next generation. And again, William, I'm not running because I'm looking at the next election. Every other candidate is. They're if they lose this run for governor, their political career is pretty much over. So I'm not running for the next election. I'm running for the next generation. And so affordability is huge in my mind. We are running to remove property tax here in Michigan. They've already done that in a lot of states. Property tax is something that if you're renting from the sorry, you're renting from the government if you're paying property tax. And if they can take your home away because you failed to pay a tax to them, to me, that's criminal. People have spent 30 years paying off their homes. And if you say your spouse dies, you're living on a fixed income, you don't have any children who you can move in with and take care of you. You're going to lose your house because your spouse died. That's criminal. And so we're fighting for that. We're definitely going to cut the budget by $11 billion to make it more affordable. I remember Ron DeSantis saying it was last week or the week before, we are a low tax state in Florida because we're a low budget state. Michigan and Georgia have the same population. Georgia's budget's around $40 billion. Michigan's at 80 to 85. So we're going to drop it down to 69 in the first year that I can sign the budget because I have my veto pen. So that's huge to me, affordability, because I don't want people moving out of our state. And one last thing on that, we could talk about the percentages of people moving out, but it's not just percentages, it's real. There are empty chairs at dinner tables that could have our kids or our grandkids sitting at, but our children have left Michigan because Whitmer has just overtaxed. In fact, she's taken it from, trying to remember what the budget was, $58 billion to 85 in her 8 years of being governor. And at the rate we're going, we will be bankrupt in 5 years. So something drastically has to change. And that would be my answer in terms of affordability as well, adding that to our platform. Where is freedom challenged the most?
Wait, before you answer that question, I want to interrupt with one thought. You brought up, well, not only the outward migration, and you brought up how the cost of living. I think our country has gotten so focused ideologically, and that's coming from the narratives that we need to do things like raise minimum wage. We need to, they think we need to have a guaranteed income, if you will. This is things that are coming from that leftist mentality, but what a lot of people don't realize, they're not making a connection when the Republicans or conservative minded people say we need to lower the budgets, we need to reduce spending, we need to find ways to reduce the inflation rate. You're basically doing the same thing. You're making it easier for people who make less to be able to live, a good life. And a lot of those, if we continue to raise minimum wages and we continue I guess, entertain that thought, if you will, and we never lower the budgets, the inflation that gets as a result of that hurts more Americans in the long run. So I'm glad that you have the idea of reducing the spending there. But I'll let you now. Now I'll let you answer that question.
Okay, so the biggest threat on freedom in America to me is the administrative state, and it's not just because of what's happening to me with the Bureau of Elections overriding a veto or ignoring a veto by the governor and continuing to do the 750 signature sampling, but I see it everywhere. I talk to people in Michigan. I've been doing this for 4 years since I ran in 2022. People talk about the overreach of Eagle, the overreach of DNR, the overreach of every bureaucratic agency in Michigan. And I believe it's the same way in America as well. And the government has grown so large that they say, we need your tax dollars. And so what that does is it creates a cycle where in order to get to live the American dream, both mom and dad have to work outside of the home. And they only do that to pay for the bigger budgets. If we cut the budget down, we could actually get back to a single family income where, people could live the American dream making what they make. Michigan has passed prevailing wage, which is basically keep increasing the minimum wage. I'm against that. It takes away ingenuity. It takes away enthusiasm to work hard, to work for that raise. It's the entitlement mentality by doing that. And whenever that happens, it leads to socialism. Socialism leads to communism historically. And the only way you can get out of socialism or communism is to shoot your way out of it and start everything fresh again. I'm not going to let that happen in Michigan. We're going to go back to our founding principles that have made this country great and made this state. It was the arsenal of democracy, and it was the place where everybody wanted to live. Detroit was the Paris of the world, of America. Detroit was the richest, wealthiest city in America, and some even claim in the world at one point. And we're going to change all of that because we're not simply doing it financially. We're bringing righteousness back to the streets in Michigan and straightening everything out.
Ralph, thank you so much for that answer. That's a great answer. The administrative state. I really not only appreciate it, but I agree with it 100%. Hang on one second. I'm gonna ask while we close out. I'm gonna ask my guest to please share this show. And everybody, you got to know somebody in Michigan, a relative, a friend. I know I've got several friends that are from Michigan, live in Michigan, and have relatives in Michigan. Please share the interview with them because this is somebody that is bringing some light and truth to the things that's happening in Michigan. That's why I brought Ralph on. Ralph, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Everybody else, please share the show.